Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered Truth. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. Um, Today we're talking about healing, and this episode is going to be split into two episodes. The first part is the ugly side of healing, and that's what we're going to be talking about right now. So, first of all, healing is not linear, it is a process. When I say it's not linear, what I mean is it doesn't start and stop and then you're done. It is a process. It's like a spiral, okay? So, and I like to think of it as a spiral that's going up, okay? So, down here at the beginning, something happens, and then you have a choice of whether you're going to heal from that thing, confront how you feel, confront what happened, and heal from it, or whether you're going to just avoid it and then dismiss it and keep moving. All right. If you choose to do the work and to heal, then you're going to go up a little bit because you have overcome a certain aspect of a wounded past self. Okay. So then as you get up and you start moving around, you evolve past that thing, then maybe something happens again and it's not the same thing, but it's a different trigger for the same wound. Or maybe it's a new trigger for a different wound that you have forgot about or you didn't even think about. Okay. And so then you have the choice again. Are you going to deal with that or are you going to avoid it and dismiss it? All right. So every time that you decide, okay, I'm going to go ahead and deal with this, there's a process to that. Okay. You don't just say, okay, all right, I'm looking at it. Now what? People a lot of times don't talk about how to heal. All right. And, this is not a prescription to other people. This is just what I did. Okay. What worked for me. So this channel, as most of you know, is about my own personal journey, my own personal healing, spiritual growth, and personal development journey. And I share, examples from my own past and my own story, as well as points and tips and tricks and things that I've learned to help me progress along. All right. For this episode, you may want something to write with. You may want some paper because I have 4 key points that I'm going to be explaining. And I'm going to try to keep this pretty short so that this whole episode in its entirety is not too long. Okay. So you will see me looking down quite a bit because I've been working on this episode for a very long time and, kind of picking it up, putting it down, back and forth, like for over a year. So I did go through all of my notes. However, I am a teacher. So when I say I got notes, honey, they are full pages and they are very thorough. Okay. So I don't want to sit up here and just read everything to you, but I do need to look down and reference from time to time. Anyway, the first point that I want to make is facts over feelings. So the first step of the ugly process of healing, okay, because a lot of times people make it seem like it's this pretty ASMR video with the cute clothes and you're in your soft era and whatever, and it's just all beautiful. You sitting in the grass and listening to birds chirp and all of that, which that is part of it, but that is not the first part. The first part is the ugly side of healing, okay? And the ugly side begins with what happened, okay? We got to look at the facts over the feelings. Sometimes we get so caught up in our feelings that we let our feelings overtake us and we don't even really acknowledge the facts. And sometimes our feelings can be like triggers that segue into trauma responses and they make everything worse. Okay. So if we just kind of lean into our feelings only and use that to exacerbate the facts, then we're not actually healing. We're just in our feelings. That's all. Okay. And sometimes our feelings don't even align with the facts. Like we could be feeling how we feeling, but what we think is the fact is not really a fact. Like we could create a whole narrative and scenario justifying why we feel how we feel, but it's based on something that's not even a fact. Okay, so let me give you a hypothetical example here. Let's say that you have a deep-seated abandonment wound, um, given to you by your parents because they, basically left you to raise yourself or whatever. Okay, and if that is the case, I'm so sorry that that happened for you and that had to be awful. Okay, and I will be praying for anyone that may have encountered anything like that, because that's horrible. I have a lot of students that have experienced different things like that as well, and it definitely leaves a mark. I've also encountered adults that have these type of wounds as well, and it's not, it's very like heartbreaking to see how things have evolved for them in life sometimes. Now, let's say that you have this deep-seated abandonment wound and you didn't even realize that it was there. Like, your parents wasn't good or whatever, but you just kind of leave it at that. You just like, oh, they wasn't great parents, and you just chalk it up to that, and then you just dismiss and avoid. Okay, part of that could be because you didn't have a choice. You were in survival mode. You had to take care of yourself. You had to worry about your food, your next meal, your clothes, if they was gonna fit, where you could get clothes from, where you was gonna sleep for the night, like just different things like that. I'm talking about, like, some people really, have to raise themselves from a very young age. Okay, and if that's the case, it's understandable that you wouldn't be really thinking about why this happened or how it make you feel or anything like that, especially as a child. As a child, you really just don't have the emotional intelligence or emotional maturity to be able to do that. There's also a thing called arrested development, which means that emotionally you can be stuck at a particular age, emotionally, because so much trauma has happened and you're unable to process and move beyond that point. Okay, and so you could be 40 something years old, but emotionally you're still 8, you're still 7, you're still 12, you're still 15, because you have these deep seated wounds that were never addressed. Okay, and that's why we're having this conversation today, because I'm hoping that this will inspire people, to do the ugly work. Okay, so when we're talking about facts over feelings, the way we feel about this abandonment wound, maybe we're not really looking at it as a fact. We're just looking at it for how it makes us feel, right? And so then, 10, 20 years or so after the initial trauma happens, one of our friends or whoever decides they don't call us. They're supposed to call us, and then they don't. They end up not calling us when they said that they would. So it feels the same as the abandonment wound. All right. Well, when a person is unhealed and unwilling to heal, more importantly, they're going to turn that trigger into a trauma response. It will segue into a trauma response, which could look any different kind of way. Everybody is different. Some people shut down, some people lash out or whatever. But an example, hypothetically, would be, let's say this person lashes out, and so then they pop up over the person's house. They want to see what they doing. They blowing their phone up. They calling, texting, whatever. They making, subliminal posts on social media. Maybe they not. Maybe they not subliminal. Maybe they just all, just calling them out straight up on social media or whatever. And they, it's very rah rah rah. All of that or whatever, because that's how they feel. And they feel like the reason why they feel the way they feel is that person's fault. That person did this and that, and so that made them feel this way, and this is how they express those feelings. And this person already knew that, and so when they did say a thing, or they didn't call them like they said they was or whatever, they already know that they was gonna turn up, because they always turn up. Like, that's how they deal with stuff or whatever, right? And so an unhealed person will basically become the victim and justify, that I feel this way because you did this. You made me feel this way. You made me react this way. You caused all of this pain. It's your fault. Okay. So, that's where the feelings can kind of overtake us. All right. But when we look at the facts over feelings, that means, for me personally, what that means is I make a bullet list, like straight up bullet list. What happened? There's no feelings. There's no feelings in the facts over the feelings. Okay, so I will list the facts that happened. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Okay, very logical. And when I'm very logical about it, I'm sorry, y'all, I got the fan blowing in my face because it's hot and it's a hair on me somewhere, and I just feel it like my hair is blowing in my face or something. I don't know. Anyway, so we can, look at the facts for what they are, and then be very rational about how we should respond because we're being logical. We're not driven by emotion. Okay. And the process of even doing that is not just listening to facts. Like after listening to facts, if you are willing to heal, then sit with those facts. Remain quiet, calm, maybe separate yourself a little bit for a while or whatever, and be rational while you process. Like, okay, this and this and this happened. Maybe you do have a right to feel how you feel, and your feelings are legit. Like, everybody's feelings are valid. Our feelings change, though, also frequently. Okay. And so sometimes you can learn, like, you can list facts, and then you can learn more facts, which will shift your feelings. Okay. And so that's why we shouldn't be driven by our feelings, because our feelings are fleeting. Like, we could be feeling one way and then a different way in the next 5 minutes or whatever. Right. Okay. So if we are, if we kind of separate ourselves and we kind of, not necessarily go into seclusion and be all a hermit for forever and stuff like that. But, we take some time to ourselves, and we don't, try to go out to every function. We're not trying to be in everybody's face. We're not trying to just move on to the next and all of that stuff. But we actually take some time and sit down and think about what took place and how do I feel, because that's valid. But let's not sit in the feelings too long. Let's, acknowledge the feelings, but then return to the facts. Okay. Now, this happened. Why did this happen? Was part of this my own fault? Or was this just this person? Okay. And even if it was just the other person doing something because they felt like doing something, and maybe they even hurt you on purpose or whatever, those were their choices. Those were their actions, and they have their own reason for doing those things, maybe known or unknown why they did those things. And at the end of the day, that don't have nothing to do with you. Why they did what they did, why they moved the way that they move, that's their stuff. That's not your stuff. Okay. Your stuff is this and this and this happened. 1, did I bring it on myself in any way? 2, how do I feel about it? 3, what am I going to do about it? Okay. So, as far as knowing what to do, it comes from being very logical and looking at those facts without a bunch of noise in your ear. Sometimes we have to be very, very careful of who we share things with, if we even share things with people. And that's why I always recommend talking to God and listening to God. Like, I don't go to a lot of people for advice and stuff like that, because I always lean on God and ask him what I should be doing in any and every situation, because I know he's not going to steer me wrong. Okay. But that's me and my own personal relationship with God. Some people are still struggling with how to even hear God's voice and discern it from their own thoughts. Okay. And if that's you, that's understandable. We got plenty of episodes about that. Just go to the history. Okay. But in this episode particularly, I'm just trying to offer some suggestions for how to heal and how to deal with this ugly side of healing. Why is it called the ugly side? Because it usually involves a lot of ugly crying. Okay. A lot of ugly crying, a lot of ugly emotions. And then we can have strong waves of intense emotion. Like, sometimes you could be going along just fine, and then all of a sudden you have a wave of grief, especially if you lost somebody close to you before. You could have a wave of anger, if somebody really hurt you bad, and then you reflect on it or something, it just, not really reflect on it, but like something just pops up and makes you think about something or whatever, or remember something that happened or whatever. So we could have some very strong, intense emotions that flare up here and there. And those emotions are not always pretty. That's why I like to be alone, in these situations, just me and God, because He already knows how I'm feeling. And if I'm expressing it outwardly, if I'm ugly crying, if I'm, mad or whatever else, I know I'm not taking it out on nobody else. I know that He is going to help me work through that because I'm literally having a whole conversation with Him about working through it and needing Him to help me. Okay. So, you know, that's my personal strategy. Okay. um if you do have someone that you feel you can trust, that you feel is a valid source, that can offer some guidance, some insight, maybe some support or something like that, then it is a good idea to speak to someone as a sounding board, or that can maybe even offer you some type of assistance, some support, some advice, some guidance, something like that. Because maybe they've already been through something similar to that, or maybe they know a lot about a particular topic. Maybe that is their area of expertise or something. For example, let's say your homegirl, your homeboy is a psychologist, or, something like that. Then you might want to run something past them to see if you tripping, or if this was something that you like. Is this a fact or a feeling? Like, maybe it is somebody like that you need to kind of run something past. If that's the case, or sometimes even after you have sat with something and you've processed in silence, like being calm and just kind of processing things to kind of see where you are with stuff. What are the facts? What are the feelings? How do they line up? Are my feelings aligning with the facts, or are they different from what actually took place? Like, am I going down this little never ending spiral road, or am I actually going in the right direction? Sometimes it is good to have a conversation like that where you're just sharing these things with someone that you really trust. Okay. And if you don't have that, sometimes it's a good idea to journal about it, to kind of journal your thoughts out. Or if you have a prayer journal, writing what's on your mind in prayer format, speaking to God about it, and then also following up with the answer that He gave you. And I've talked about this so many times about the importance of listening to God. And this is definitely something that I do right here at this point. Like, once I know what the fact, like once I have stated the facts over the feelings, then I ask God to help me process all of that. But I also listen to God on purpose for how to deal with it. Because sometimes if we let our strong waves of emotion overtake us, then we do too much. We do way too much, and we make things way, way worse. Okay. There are so many situations where we see nowadays where, I don't want to just say young people, because it's not just young people. We see people who are broken, who have been hurt, who are, unhealed, and they're lashing out at somebody in public, and then they end up catching a case because it went too far. you know Whether it be they just got public disturbance ticket or whatever. Maybe they got separated from their kids because they had a whole crash out session in Target or something, and so now their kids are being separated from them and going to the system, and they're going to jail right then at that moment. Like, just that quick, in 5 minutes everybody's life changed. So it's, for me, it's super important to make sure that I am always following what God wants me to do in situations where I feel very emotional. Okay. I am definitely not the crash out type. I am the furthest from that. I used to be very avoidant when it came to confrontation and stuff. But I learned over the years that if I want to heal for real, I have to confront certain things. And that means speaking up. That means setting boundaries. That means enforcing boundaries. That means being able to walk away when I need to walk away and stuff like that. Okay. The next point is doing the intentional dirty work. Intentional dirty work is no bueno. Like, it's good, but it's not fun. All right. So, this could also be called shadow work. In doing shadow work leads to an ego death, which will be its own episode in the future. But basically, what we're talking about is really searching and examining our hearts and minds for clutter or for beliefs, routines, habits, or things that we just need to release because it's not serving us anymore. Again, because I'm a Christian, I like to ask God to search my heart, and then I like to listen and let the Holy Spirit show me the errors of my ways, if there are any, or just put a spotlight on the facts, rather than the feelings, so that I can see this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what I did that caused that to happen, or this is what I did as a result of that happening, something like that, right? And so I just ask God to search my heart, search my thoughts, search my beliefs and things, to make sure that everything is aligning with what He wants for me, and then giving me the courage to go ahead and act out, in the appropriate way. All right. When I talk about beliefs, what I'm talking about is like sometimes, especially if you have like a deep seated abandonment wound or something like that, you may feel unworthy of love. You may feel like love is not even a real thing. You may feel like people are just generally dishonest and mean spirited or whatever, depending on how you grew up, right? And so you could develop limiting beliefs about what God even has available for you, what exists that could be a blessing for you. And so when you're presented with a blessing, it can be very hard to even accept it, or, because you're so suspicious of past cycles repeating and different things like that. All right. And so, what we have to do in those cases is really like pick those things apart. Like when the Holy Spirit is searching our hearts and minds and showing us what we got going on and stuff, then sometimes we really got to dig into that, and we got to let certain things go. Okay. Sometimes it's letting go of the idea of how you thought it was going to be. Sometimes it's like letting go of the idea that, you know real people don't exist, like real honest people, real loyal people or whatever don't exist. Sometimes it's letting go of that. It's not even about a relationship in any type of way, whether it be friend, family, or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Sometimes it's just about like money. Sometimes it's about what you can do professionally, like your goals and dreams and things like that. If you've had people talking down to you, telling you stupid and you ain't never gonna be nothing or whatever, you're gonna have ideas and beliefs and stuff that were impressed upon you that are so deep seated. You have to really dissect and pick them apart so that you can dismantle them. Okay. And you can rise above them. But if you're not doing that work, it's like you're always trying to prove something. You doing this and that and the other thing. You busy all the time and wearing yourself out because you trying to search for external validation, not realizing that that's what you're doing. Okay. You're only doing these things because you're seeking approval and external validation. This is not because this is what God called you to do or what God is even telling you to do right now in this moment. This is, oh, how is this going to look if I do this? If I do this, I will look like this. People will admire me if I do this or that because people respect people that do this or that. I want to shine like those people shine, so I'm going to do this and that like they do this and that, and then I'll have the same type of life, or I'll have, I'll feel good regardless, blah, 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 stuff like that, right? So, sometimes people they don't even realize why they do the stuff that they do. Sometimes, people with a poverty wound, like they grew up, in challenging circumstances concerning, finances and things like that. And then, once they become an adult, they have a hard time accepting that they are worthy to make what they are actually worth, or the value, that they bring value to the table, that they should be compensated for what they bring and what they do and, how they serve and different things like that. And so when they're offered a certain amount of money because, people appreciate what they bring to the table, sometimes it can be hard for them to even accept that. So they'll turn stuff down all the time. Like, they have a great business idea and they're sitting on all kinds of income that could be alleviating some of their poverty woes or whatever. But instead of them going ahead and branching out, they justify why they do that. Like, they're like, oh, well, I just don't want to charge for this or that because I feel like, you know, God wouldn't want me to, he wants me to just do this out of the kindness of my heart or whatever. You're still doing it out of the kindness of your heart because you care. That's your passion. That's what's given to you. This is something that you are excited about doing. God gives us the desires of our heart. He also says that our gifts will make room for us. So when you're doing something because he calls you to do it, and then he tries to reward you in terms of meeting your needs because that's what he said he would do, then you turn down the resource that he's trying to give you to meet your needs, and then you complain about not having no money or whatever. Like, none of that makes sense, right? So you have a poverty wound that needs to be healed so that when God tries to bless you himself, you can receive it. When God tries to bless you with an abundant life, you are able to believe and receive that you should have that because he gave it to you. He gave you the means to draw it in, but he also gave you the blessing in terms of, monetary reward or whatever it is. Okay. So sometimes, this getting rid of these limited beliefs and things, dismantling these beliefs can look like shedding skin, right? So lobsters, if you don't know, and I side note, I'm a nerd big time. I know a little bit about everything. Okay, I don't know. It's something that I like to do for fun. Anyway, lobsters shed their shell, okay, when they grow. They like have a shell, they walk around, they do their thing, okay, and then they end up growing and growing too big for the shell. At that point, they kind of bust out of that shell that they've been wearing for however long, and then they kind of go up under a rock or in a little cove, cave, whatever, under the water, and they wait until their soft skin or their soft exterior has a shell covering over it, a new shell over it. It has grown, okay, and once that new shell grows, it's just right for them, but they got a little extra room so they can grow some more, and then eventually they'll outgrow that shell and they'll have to do the same thing all over again. Sometimes when we heal, it's the same type of process. I always like to just kind of go within, stay to myself a little bit, and really process those facts over feelings, dismantle different beliefs or different wounds, or just kind of dissect different things that I got going on in my heart, my mind, what have you, and pick those things apart as well as the cause of those things. And this is where when we examine why we feel what we feel, then it uncovers so much more that we can dig into. Okay, so going back to this abandonment wound, if you realize, like, okay, well, my feelings were hurt because my parents made me feel abandoned and neglected, and so when this person didn't show up for me, that immediately triggered that old wound. Okay, but okay, that's the first step. After that, dig a little deeper. Why was your parent acting like that? What was going on with them? And the truth is, a lot of times parents do what they know how to do, and for the most part, parents love their kids and they do the best that they know how to do with what they have. And granted, that's not always the case. We know that it's some clowns out here and some mean-spirited folks. But, for the most part, in general, parents raise their kids the way that they feel is best based on what they know and what they have experienced themselves. Okay. And so, if you have a parent like mine, my biological father was very abusive, okay, verbally, mentally, physically. I understand now that that was because that's what he knew. That's what he was exposed to as a child. But that didn't just come all at once. There was like layers to that. First, I was like, okay, well, I would never date somebody that put hands on me like that, okay? And I didn't. But then later on, I found myself in a marriage that was emotionally abusive. And I'm like, how did I even get here? Like, bro, I thought I had dealt with all of this, right? Well, emotional abuse is something that I was unfamiliar with. I did not know about that. And I did not realize, um, the wounds that I had in that area that like attracted that experience to my life. Okay. Um, and so even looking at that, I was able to, like, okay, well, why was my ex acting like that or whatever. Why was my ex-husband that way? Okay, so then I was able to realize, like, well, he was like that because that's what he knew. All right, I get it. So understanding that, it like allowed me to be able to forgive people that have hurt me in the past, and not just forgive them, but to really love them and pray for them out of love, and like sincerely and deeply, because oh my goodness, they were a child, and this and that happened to them, and that caused them to turn out this way and have this view of the world. And that's sad. So I can pray for them for real, like out of love, and extend grace and forgiveness, because they really didn't know no better. Does that mean that I'm going to put myself in the same exact situation with those same exact people? No, absolutely not. Okay. But it did help me have grace and compassion for them. And God tells us to walk in love. And whenever we walk in love, like, we experience so much joy and gratitude. And that really is how we begin to heal. Um, the third point that I want to make is letting go is a process. Okay. Sometimes we act like letting go should happen overnight. We break up with somebody, the next day we out here trying to date folks. We out here trying to get to know people and exchange numbers and the whole thing and stuff, because we broke up yesterday and that's in the past, and we're gonna leave the past in the past, that type of stuff. Okay. Or with a job, the job you didn't like, and so boom, you gonna quit, you start another job, you let that job go, you start the new job, and then it's not too long before you start noticing that the same situations that happened in the previous position, relationship, whatever it is, are now kind of surfacing again in this new situation. And that's because the wound is still there. You haven't dealt with the wound. You just went to a different location, or you just went to a different relationship, or what have you. Okay. So letting go is a process, physically letting go of an environment, like say you moving from one house to another, letting go of that physical environment, you packing up your things, you putting them in the truck, that's one aspect of it. Once you get that to that new address, whatever it was that was going on in the old house, if you haven't dealt with it, will also come up again in the new house. So you gotta kind of like, well, I'm not saying you have to, but for me, I have to deal with things, and I prefer to deal with things thoroughly, head on, right then in the moment. Take the time that I need to address it, so that it won't come back up again. Every time I move on, I'm moving up, that sort of thing. Okay. Think about your favorite raggedy t-shirt. Okay, there was a time when a t-shirt was new and it was beautiful and it served its purpose. And then at some point it's just very, very flimsy, and although it's super comfortable, right? Because it's all worn out, and so it's soft and it's loose, and it's just like the perfect sleep shirt and stuff. But then, it can, after a while, it can start becoming very raggedy. So now it's the shirt that you wear when you cut the grass, or you do yard work, or you do deep cleaning in the house, or maybe it's a hair shirt. So when you use hair color or something like that, you don't care if you get something on it, or you don't care if you get whatever. Okay. Maybe it's the shirt that you paint in, so you paint rooms in it, you don't care if you get paint on it and stuff like that. Okay. So there comes a point where that shirt gets so raggedy, though, that you may have to just let it go. And our favorite raggedy shirts, sometimes we hold on to them so long because we don't have something else to replace them. They feel so good and so comfortable to us. We get set in that. And so it's the same thing with people who are unhealed. Sometimes people are just like, well, I clap back. That's just what I do. I crash out. That's just what I do. You already knew I was going to act like that when you did this and that. You shouldn't have did this or that, and then I wouldn't have to act like this or whatever, right? Well, this goes back to the very beginning, like facts over feelings. Just because you feel a way don't mean that it's right. Just because you feel a way don't mean that it's based on something that's actually a fact. Maybe you just feel a way because you feel a way and you haven't dealt with your feelings. Maybe that is true. Okay. So, sometimes we can let go of one part of a thing, but then we have to dig deeper, like this little spiral. We're confronted with a new trigger or, a new form of trauma similar to what we've experienced in the past, but a little bit different. It's a fresh trauma, but it's similar to things we have already dealt with. And so sometimes we got to dig a little bit deeper, like where is this coming from? What happened here, there, whatever. Sometimes it don't have nothing to do with us. Sometimes it's just that other person. Sometimes it's just God giving us the opportunity to show that we have learned from that, and so we don't have to react the way that we always do. There are some people though that are comfortable in the way that they react, and so they justify their actions or poor judgment, poor choices, poor behavior, and blame the person who triggered them as the reason why they're acting how they're acting, and they feel completely okay to do that and to keep doing that, and everybody should just know that that's how they are. Okay. When when we are comfortable being like basically toxic, okay, because we're refusing to heal, then what can happen is we can sabotage ourselves. We can sabotage ourselves professionally, financially, sometimes even relationally with other people and stuff, because we are so committed to feeling unworthy, undeserving. We're so committed to, this rah-rah lifestyle, this clap back, crash out type of lifestyle or whatever. We're so committed to believing that good people don't exist, that there are no good men, women, whatever in the world, that there are no, good bosses that actually want to see you win in the world. There's not enough money to go around, whatever. Okay. We can sabotage ourselves with that. All right. So, you may hear somebody, a hypothetical example. Let's say somebody is talking about, they're always talking about how they don't have enough money or they feel limited, financially and stuff like that. And they have a great talent. And so they do their talent because they like doing their talent. And they do their talent and they give these gifts away and things like that. And then God tries to bless them financially for what they've done. Okay. Well, because they're just so used to being broke, they're so used to feeling like that's all they deserve, is to have that type of poverty experience, or they have a scarcity mindset, like there's not enough, I will always be in lack, like that sort of thing. Then when God tries to bless them with what they have really been wanting, which is financial relief, they have a really hard time with accepting that. Okay. Same thing is true for relationships. Let's say somebody's like, oh, there's nobody good out here because everybody is just selfish, everybody is vain, everybody is shallow, everybody's blah 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 blah, everybody's toxic, the dating pool got pee in it, whatever. Okay. And so then good people cross your path, and you don't want to believe that those good people are actually legit and sincere or genuine, because you haven't really experienced that before. Maybe God is trying to tell you that, you know what, I'm so proud of you for putting that work in, and now I'm going to bless you with the thing that you've been wanting. Okay. But then you can't accept it because you feel like unworthy of it, undeserving. You feel like, you're not good enough. You feel like you're going to mess it up. You feel like this person ain't really loyal for real. They probably going to cheat on me. They're probably going to hurt me, whatever. You get latched on to that little too tight shell, and you get committed to not growing. And so, and definitely not healing. And you don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want to do that work and stuff. And so you're not letting go. You're not releasing. You're not moving onward. You're not moving upward. Okay. I do want to also say that, sometimes in Christianity, we talk a lot about Lot's wife. and how, God was leading them out of one place into another, and he said, don't look back or you'll turn into a pillar of salt. She looks back, she turns into a pillar of salt. Okay, and then Lot just ended up having to leave her there. He couldn't do nothing to, with her. He couldn't bring her back to life or nothing like that, whatever, because she was a pillar of salt. I like to think of this pillar of salt as being like full of resentment, or full of bitterness, full of anger, full of grief, and loss, and just really holding on to trauma and things like that, right? And so, looking back in terms of like longing, and I want to go back there and entertaining these unhealthy spaces or unhealthy dynamics from the past, like going back to someone who physically harmed you, only to be in that situation again because that person has chosen not to heal. You chose to heal and deal with your stuff. They chose to avoid and dismiss. So when you come together again as a do-over, that person is bound to do the same thing again because they have not put in the work to evolve and grow. Okay. So when we talk about, going back and being in those situations or whatever, to me, that's kind of like Lot's wife. Like, you know, looking back in terms of like reflecting facts over feelings. This is what happened, which led to this, which led to this, which caused me to feel this way, which caused me to do this and that. And again, facts over feelings. Was that even the right thing to do? Were my feelings even lining up with the facts? All of that is reflection and introspection, which God encourages us to do. He encourages us to walk in wisdom, and wisdom is applied experience and knowledge. Okay, so you only gain wisdom by learning on purpose, whether it be through books or classes or whatever, but then also applying the things that you learn, So, in Christianity, of course, this means studying the Word of God, applying the Word of God to your life, and then, you can walk in wisdom because you have applied the knowledge plus the experience that you have already had so that you can keep yourself moving forward and upward. Okay. So this first part of this episode, the ugly side of healing, these are all of the unpleasant aspects of healing, but it is so necessary before we can move forward to the beautiful side of healing. I will see you back shortly for part 2. Thank you for watching.